Hello, I'm Shelby DuPont, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sex education in our public school system. So, sex education isn't really, there's no federal law that blankets that says every state has to have some form of sex education. That's not non existent. They just have little, like, baby laws that sort of coincide with sex education in certain states. So even though the federal government doesn't have a blanket law requiring sex education, they do donate over about $2 billion to abstinence-only education. So I think that kind of tells us where they think we should be teaching. So there's not a whole lot of restrictions on sex education. One of the only requirements that a lot of things have is called medical accuracy, which is something we'll go into a little bit later, but it doesn't totally have anything to do with medicine or accuracy. Also, some schools require or allow parental intervention in their sex education. So basically, parents can opt out of their kids receiving a sex education, or sometimes parents can even be a part of it, which is a little abnormal. So before we really get into it, I'm going to talk a little bit about how other countries do sex education and how it works a lot better. So in a lot of European countries like, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, they have crazy, crazy low teen pregnancy rates. So usually about 4 teen births happen for every 1,000 planned pregnancies, which is really, really impressive because here in America, it's nowhere near that good. And they have really incredible comprehensive sex education that's required for all of their public schools. And instead of saying no, don't have sex, super bad, they gear the curriculum towards sex being normal, healthy, positive, and just teach their students how to do it safely, which is impressive, and it clearly works. So, back in 1981, back to America. In 1981, we passed the Adolescent Family Life Act, known as AFLA, in the Public Service Act, or Public Health Service Act. So this is known as the Chastity Law, which is problematic from the top. Basically, the program is in place to encourage adolescents to postpone sexual activity until marriage, emphasizing chastity and self-discipline, which is... I don't know if any of us have ever met a 17-year-old, but it doesn't work. And we still donate hundreds of millions of dollars to this program every year when it's clearly biased and religious and all of that awful stuff. Someone sued in the early 90s saying hey, this law violates the Establishment Clause. And the court was no, we just won't hold meetings for it in churches or anything like that. So it's still in place here today in 2019. So let's get into some numbers. 47% of high school students are sexually active in America. And of those 47%, only 60% of them use condoms. So, the math on that's pretty clear. 9.8 million STI cases are diagnosed every year in high school students, because they don't receive comprehensive sex education. So that's awesome. It's really common in America to do abstinence-only sex education because that's what's advocated for and funded, frankly. So there are only 24 states in the United States that actually require that teachers and school systems in general actually have sex education at all. So that's only half. Only half of the states actually require sex education. I'm from Texas. I certainly didn't get a sex education in high school. So of those 24 states that require sex education, only 13 of those require their sex education be medically accurate, which feels like it should probably be not allowed. So basically that's saying that it's up to the discretion of whoever is giving the education on what's true and what's not, which just can't be right. 37 states in the United States require abstinence-only sex education. So they don't require a sex education, but if they do, it has to be abstinence only. And of those 37, that require abstinence-only education, only 18 of them require that whoever's teaching tell the students that birth control exists and how to use it. So that's, problematic. So in our Constitution, not in our Constitution, Section 510, U.S. Supreme Court says that there's 8 major points to what constitutes an abstinence-only education. So I'm going to go over a few of those that really upset me. So let's see. The number 1 point there's an exclusive purpose to abstinence-only education. It's teaching social, psychological, and health gains to be realized by abstaining from sexual activity, which, that doesn't sound too bad, pretty straightforward what abstinence-only education's for. All right, so let's scroll down a little further. The third point teaches that abstinence from sexual activity is the only certain way to avoid out-of-wedlock pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and other associated health problems. It's, as you and I both know, it's certainly not the only way to avoid those things, and out-of-wedlock pregnancy is probably not something that should be included in a law that we have to follow, as it is a religious belief that people should not be having premarital sex. All right, let's see, point number 5 teaches that sexual activity outside of the context of marriage is likely to have harmful psychological and physical effects. It's 8 points of basically saying sex before marriage is bad and you will go to hell, which is not what you like to see in a Supreme Court ruling. So abstinence-only education, it doesn't work. There's so many statistics, et cetera, that say, hey, this doesn't work. We need to try something else. Just looking at America's demographic, we have thousands and thousands of kids every year diagnosed with STIs because they didn't know how to have safe sex. So, there was a court case in Southern California in 2012, the American Academy of Pediatrics versus Clovis Unified School District. So basically, the school district had abstinence-only education, and kids were, dropping left and right with STIs. They were just riddled with sexually transmitted diseases. It was wild. Over half of the sexually active students contracted chlamydia, a third contracted gonorrhea. It obviously wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. This abstinence-only education was containing no information on sexually transmitted diseases or how to avoid them, no information on HIV or AIDS, which is required in a lot of states. There was no information whatsoever on homosexual relationships. There was actually a video that compared a non-virgin woman to a dirty shoe that you wouldn't want to purchase, which, yikes. So basically, the person suing the school district won this case, clearly. And the video was removed, and the school switched to comprehensive sex education, and since then their STI rate has dropped dramatically, which speaks volumes. So let's get into medical accuracy a little bit while we have time. Medically accurate doesn't necessarily mean a doctor has to say this is what happens. It just means that the court of that specific state has to think that it's probably medically accurate. So for example, in Oklahoma, the definition of medically accurate is, the State Department of Education shall develop curriculum and materials for AIDS prevention, education in conjunction with the State Department of Health. Sounds good. Okay. Then it says, a school district may also develop its own AIDS presentation, education, curriculum, and materials. So you could go by the Department of Health. You could go by a bunch of teachers and people on the education board that think this is probably how AIDS happens. So the medically accurate thing is problematic. The whole system is kind of problematic. But all that to say, I think that the way we go about fixing this is really just getting a blanket federal law saying this is how we're going to educate our students in public school. This is what you have to do, and that's that.